time, and she did an amazing job. She's going to speak to us tonight about trade agreements, particularly the Pacific trade agreement, and how that relates to workers' rights and the condition of workers and labor in this country. But I want you to know that as Minister for Economic Justice for the UCC Church, she deals with a lot of other issues, such as immigration, such as the national budget, such as taxes, such as conditions of workers. She writes in a blog for her church. She's also been quoted in many publications. She's testified before Congress. Just an amazing person. And the thing that's so great about her, she's often the smartest person in the room, but she talks to us in a way that I can understand. So I'm really happy to introduce Edie Rasell.
I wonder if I can take this mic out of here.
I think you can.
Pull it. There you go.
Perfect. Thank you. It's wonderful to be here. I thank you for the invitation. I thank the Orange County Interfaith Committee to aid farm workers for their faithful work for 49 years. Is that what it is?
Since 65.
Incredible. It's just incredible. And as a part of the board of the National Farm Worker Ministry, I want to thank you in advance for your contributions that will come from the dinner tonight. I thank each one of you for being here, for doing all the things, taking part in the silent auction and buying the things in the back. It makes a difference. The ministry does a lot of really important work with farm workers, advocating for farm workers, supporting farm workers' struggles, and you make a real contribution tonight. And also, I know other things the committee does over the course of the year to support farm workers. So thanks to all of you, thanks to the committee, and thanks to Suzanne and Val, who are hosting me the last few days. And not only has Suzanne been doing all the work to get ready for this, she's also been taking me to different places. So I appreciate that a great deal, Suzanne. Now, farm workers, we all know, live very difficult lives. And I thought I'd start by saying, if you bought one of those bags, or if you've been around the Farm Worker Ministry much, you know they have this saying that is, did you eat today? Thank a farm worker. And I'm going to add something, and I was talking to the gentleman in the back, I can't remember, but he told me that he had been in the past a farm worker. And I just want to say, thank God for farm workers, and thank God that I don't have to work as a farm worker. You know? Thank God that all of us are not out working in the fields, because we know it's really difficult, hard, poorly paid work. Agriculture is one of the industries with the highest accident rates. And if you're a farm worker who gets injured, don't expect much. You probably don't have health insurance. Your employer is probably not going to do much for you. You're probably going to be on your own. And you might not even be getting water out there or shelter from the sun. It's a brutal job. And one reason why those conditions persist, I want to check on the mic. Is the mic okay?
Yes.
One reason why those conditions persist is because many of those farm workers are undocumented, right? Many of them are immigrants, and many of them are undocumented. And we have weak labor laws in this country for everybody, but if you are undocumented, then you are under special exploitation often, right?
Yes.
And if you try to speak up or push back against your employer or try to get something better, or God forbid try to join a union, there's a very good chance that your employer will call immigration on you. So people are reluctant to even speak out, which is why the unions that work with them are so important. The United Farm Workers here in California and other places around the country, and the other unions, the Farm Labor Organizing Committee based in Ohio, working now a lot in North Carolina, the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, which I know have been through here, and the people here have been very supportive of some of their struggles during the Taco Bell boycott in particular. Cocoon in Oregon, and other farm worker organizations are really critical to help farm workers organize and try to get a better life for themselves. Now, these immigrants, many of whom are undocumented, are here, and they didn't come to the United States thinking that they were going to be, they knew that they were not going to be welcomed with open arms. They knew they were probably going to be at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of jobs and benefits and wages, but they came nonetheless. And why did they come? Well, they came because they knew they might get a job. They knew that with struggle and patience, they might get a job. But they also came because they were, many of them, pushed out of their homes. And I say pushed out because I'm referring to economic conditions that forced them to leave. Not maybe every single one of them, but it's a very common scenario, right? That I'm thinking now of people in Mexico and Central America that are poor, their kids are not getting enough to eat, they need money to send their kids to school, they may have people who are ill in the family, for whatever reason they need money. And so despite the hazards of the journey, riding trains outside the train car, through Mexico and Central America, crossing the border, we know what all that entails, getting here in the United States and maybe getting picked up and getting immediately deported, or spending time in a deportation center. We were just talking about the horrible conditions people undergo in those deportation centers. They come nevertheless because conditions at home are untenable. They have just about no future at home. They have maybe a little bit of a future up here, but they are forced to come. You all probably are familiar with NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, right? It went into effect in 1994. It was a trade agreement, so-called, a trade agreement between the United States, Mexico, and Canada. And it put in place a lot of rules that became our rules in the United States, became the rules in Mexico, became the rules in Canada, and became the rules governing the international relations between those countries. And some of those rules enabled U.S. agribusiness companies to export more easily and to have their products enter into Mexico more easily. And in the years after NAFTA began, our corn exports into Mexico from the United States went up fourfold. Now, one of the consequences of that was that there were many subsistence farmers in Mexico with low levels of education, were barely making it even before NAFTA, and then with corn flooding into the country, even though it was not the kind of corn that they traditionally had eaten in Mexico, but nonetheless with cheap corn flooding into the country, those corn farmers found that they could not compete. And if they had tried to sell any corn on the international market, that was even more difficult because of all the cheap corn that was on the international market. Now, why is corn coming from the United States so cheap? I keep saying that. It's because it's subsidized, right? Part of our farm policies is to subsidize small farmers. Well, let me rephrase that. That's kind of the myth, right? That we're going to subsidize small farmers. In fact, the farms that we subsidize are the really huge ones. 75% of all those payments go to about 10% of farms. And these are all very large farms. 63% of all of our farms, including many of the real family farms, don't get any subsidy dollars. The subsidy dollars, when a farmer gets them, it means that I've got money coming into my pocket. And so I don't need to be able to balance my books and make a profit just based on what I can sell my products for. I can in fact sell them more cheaply and still make a profit because I'm going to get my subsidies. So I can, and because farmers know they can get these subsidies, they grow more and more and more than the market really can bear, and it drives the price down. So the price on the market goes very low. Much of the corn and other commodities is bought by big, huge companies like Cargill, Archer Daniels Midlands, which were called ADM. These huge, consolidated, near monopolies. So the corn is overproduced and other products are overproduced, drives the price down. Thank you very much, says ADM on Cargill, as they buy it for those very low prices. Meanwhile, the farmers are getting subsidized, and huge agribusiness farmers are getting subsidized by our taxpayer dollars, so they're still making good profits, even though they're selling their products at a very low price. But that very low priced products are what we then sell on the international market and drive the Mexican farmers off their farms. They lose their livelihoods, and what are they going to do? They haven't had a lot of education. NAFTA actually did not only hurt farmers in Mexico, it destroyed a lot of small and medium-sized like manufacturing firms, other firms who are now competing internationally. They couldn't do it. Wages stagnated, fell for a while. So these farmers who no longer could make a living, it was bad. It was hard enough before, but after NAFTA, they really couldn't make a living. They were forced to leave the farms. Some of them went to the cities, others, as we know, came north. Pushed out of Mexico, pushed out of their homelands, and came north, hoping for things to be better. That was 1994. We've seen the results of NAFTA, and by the way, NAFTA was not good for workers in this country either, right? Whole other story we could talk about. But since 1994, the United States has enacted a number of trade agreements with other countries. And all of these agreements are based on NAFTA. They include all the same provisions that were in NAFTA. And now, we're in the process of negotiating the granddaddy of all trade agreements. People call it NAFTA on steroids, and it's called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I see a lot of heads nodding. This is good. It warms my heart because people are paying attention, right? This is a treaty among 12 countries around the Pacific Rim. I'll just name them briefly if I can think of them all. Australia, New Zealand, Vietnam, Malaysia, Japan, Brunei, Chile, Peru, Mexico, Canada, the US. Is that 12? I don't know. Close enough. But they're kind of based around the Pacific Rim. This treaty is going to be open-ended. So going forward, anybody that wanted to join was willing to fulfill the requirements of the treaty could join. So other people say that this may be the last trade agreement that we ever have because anybody that wants to can join it. So what's the deal? What's the deal? What's the problem with this trade agreement? Well, first of all, it's not a trade agreement. It's an agreement to set the economic rules for the global economy. And once the agreement is signed and ratified by Congress, then these rules don't just apply to the international economy, they apply to our economy as well. International treaties have the same power as domestic law in the United States by law. So once this treaty is signed, this becomes our economic laws. Now this treaty has been in negotiation for a couple of years, and it is being negotiated in secret. Now as I go through this process and describe what's going on, think about what a democratic system should be like.
It's not secret from the corporations.
The treaty is being negotiated in secret from us. We don't know what it says. It's being negotiated in secret from Congress. Congress cannot find out what it says. A congressman, actually from California, Daryl Asa, wanted to sit in. Is that how you say his name? Asa. He wanted to sit in on some of the negotiations. He's Republican. He wanted to sit in just to follow some of the negotiations. They told him no. If you're a congressman and do really push and want to see this, okay, you can see the text of the treaty as it's being negotiated, but you cannot copy it down. You can't copy it like on a copy machine, and you can't discuss it with anybody. it's being negotiated in secret. Now, is this a democratic process? No. But it's not secret from, and somebody here was getting at this already, it's not secret from, obviously, the trade negotiators from the different countries, and it's also not secret from 600 corporate lobbyists who are part of the process, sitting at the table, writing these rules.
Obama?
Now, let's think about our U.S. economic system. We have corporations that have been around for, a long time. But over the years, we have passed laws and regulations, often these have been hard fought, to make our system kind of more benevolent. So, corporations can't just do anything. They can't make products that are unsafe. Food is supposed to be safe. We have, and all of this is still a work in progress, right? I mean, none of this stuff is really as good as it might be, I don't think. But we have food inspections. We have different kinds of safety things. If you buy electronic equipment, you can hopefully be sure that it's not going to electrocute you, right? We have restraints put on corporations' ability to make money. We have regulations in the banking system. Now, we got rid of a lot of those regulations, and a few years ago we saw what happened when we got rid of too many, right? And we still haven't gotten all the regulations back. But we regulate banks to some extent. We regulate insurance so that we buy insurance. We kind of know what we're getting. They can't change the rules on us. So even though our efforts in this country to regulate commerce and protect consumers, protect the environment, we need to improve in that regard as well, but we're making some progress. These rules and regulations that restrict the freedom of corporations to do whatever they want, we have for a long time sought and fought for and achieved some measure of good things in this regard. Now let me ask you, if you're one of the 600 corporate lobbyists meeting with some very friendly government officials, writing the rules for the international economy that are also going to apply to the U.S., which of those things are you going to include? Are you going to include all those regulations that you never liked in the first place and would rather get rid of? No. I mean, some maybe, but for the most part, this is the problem. Okay? The treaties, which are really not so much about trade, of the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, there's like 29 chapters. 5 have anything to do with trade. So it's regulations and rules about trade, but also about financial flows, banking, insurance, intellectual property, and things like patents. If you're a drug company and make a new drug, how long can you keep the patent and keep it in a monopoly and high prices on that drug?
10 years.
Well, it's an important question, because if I'm buying the generic, if I'm buying the brand name, it's a lot more expensive than buying the generic, right? So if I'm somebody that needs that drug, I'm hoping it's quickly going to become generic, so it's going to be cheaper for me to buy. But if the rules change and now the patent time is extended, well, that might be great for the drug company, but it's not good for me, it's not good for consumers. These are the kinds of rules, any one of which might be tiny, but it's the whole package being negotiated that's going to erode the safeguards that we have spent, I'm going to say decades and even centuries trying to put in place. Now, trade, international trade, the increasing integration of the international economy and the integration of the countries, that could be beneficial to everybody on average. If we're trying to grow the economic pie and do it in ways that are responsible, that protect the environment, that make sure that everybody is included, if we're trying to do that, we could do it better if we all worked together and kind of did have more integration of the international economy. However, whether it's going to be better or not depends upon how it's done and what the rules are and Number two, anytime you make changes like this, and make some changes and bring more integration and more interconnectedness, anytime you make changes like that, there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers. And you can think of any kind of economic change you want to think of. Let's just say they're going to build a new building downtown. That's great. We're going to have a new city hall. It's going to be more convenient, it's going to be more energy efficient, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be a whole lot better. But there's going to be some people whose house is going to get torn down because that new city hall is going where they live. There's going to be winners and there's going to be some losers. But if the whole pie is bigger, if the system is better because of the integration, then we're going to have excess wealth, excess income. We can compensate the losers, and the theory says we can compensate the losers and we're still going to be better off. And when I say losers, I mean the people who like lose their jobs or lose out because of these changes that are being made. So we don't need to be against globalization. We don't need to be against increasing economic integration and trade. But what is critically important is how it's done, who's writing the rules, in other words, and that there's losers. And we're going to try to help them out. Under the current regime, under the current way in which we go about doing these trade agreements, none of those things happen. And so we have winners and the losers just lose, and the winners win big, and the rules are getting rewritten, and gradually we're all going to realize that we're getting messed over. And here's where we bring it back to farm workers. Throughout the developing world, the third world, global south, many of the poorest people support themselves through agriculture. You see where this is going, right? So to the extent that we bring more global integration, more merging together of our economic systems, then the United States is really a dominant agricultural producer, especially of those commodity products. And I'm going to name the five that are the big five money losers, the ones that we subsidize and lose all our tax dollars subsidizing: corn, wheat, soybeans, cotton, and rice. Right? I see people here like, that's right, right? Those are the ones that we subsidize a lot. Now, just as an aside, let's recognize this may not be the best country in which to grow sugar, or cotton for that matter. There's other places that could grow it more cheaply than we can here in terms of the climate's better, the environment's better for doing those things. Nonetheless, we do it here, we subsidize the farmers. That's not good. Okay. But nonetheless, so we're going to have this increasing integration of the global economy, and our huge agribusinesses that are global actors, they're already active around the world, that are receiving billions of our taxpayer dollars, which allow them to sell the things they grow, those five, more cheaply than they can be produced, even be produced here. They're selling them for below what it costs them to produce. And they certainly can sell them for below what it would cost somebody in the global south to produce. As we do these trade agreements, are going to be putting more and more of these small subsistence farmers off their farms. So what are they going to do? What's left to do? They're not going to be able to make a living on their farms. They're going to go to their nearest city looking for work. And it's not just the farmers, there's also rural agricultural businesses. Somebody's got to grind that corn and make the tortillas, right? Somebody's got to do the other things that go along with agricultural. So it's farmers, and then the people that work in the agricultural industries in these countries. They're no longer, if there's no farms around, then there's nobody that's going to need to mill the corn, there's somebody that's going to slaughter the animals. All those people are going to lose their jobs too. And what are they going to do? They're going to go to the nearest big city, they're going to be looking for work, there's more slums created, there's more unemployed people. And there's going to be more people deciding, I got to leave my country. Look for work. They're probably not going to all end up here. They wouldn't. It's too far to come for many of them. But it's creating enormous amounts of misery for people. And so, what's to be done? The Trans-Pacific Partnership, I want to suggest, should not pass Congress. Congress should not approve this. Now, every trade bill that's come before Congress lately, starting with NAFTA, then we have the Central America Free Trade Agreement. I'm just kind of hitting the big ones. Central America Free Trade Agreement. Then we had Korea and Colombia Free Trade Agreement. Very knowledgeable people here. Not in their heads. What am I forgetting? Let's just jump ahead now, and the next major one we'll say is the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But every one of those other ones have been very, very hard fought. There's a lot of opposition in this country to these trade bills, and it's growing all the time. Hopefully, this time, we might be able to defeat it by putting enough pressure on Congress. Now, just to back up a minute, the way they often try to get these trade bills passed is Congress is first asked by the administration to pass what's called Fast Track. Trade Promotion Authority, Fast Track. And what this means is Congress is actually voting to give away its power. Congress votes, and if they pass it, they decide that when this trade bill comes to them, they're going to have a limited time to consider it, 60 to 90 days. And then when they actually do vote on it, they vote yes or no. They cannot amend it. They can't make changes to it. They're not going to hold hearings and see how it's going to affect people. They're just going to vote up or down. Now, why would Congress give away their power like that? But nonetheless, so we've got two ways to stop this bill. We've got to stop Fast Track. Have Congress not say, yes, we're going to fast track this bill. And then we've got to stop the TPP from being passed, right? I mean, we got lots of fights on our plates, right? But this one, the TPP, NAFTA on steroids, is bad, bad, bad. And we have not even talked about what its impact on the United States would be. We haven't talked about all the bad things in NAFTA that people here probably are familiar with, that are contributing to inequality in this country and around the world, are increasing corporate power around the world. Corporate power meaning the transnationals, the multinationals, not, the local stores. They're being hurt by this stuff as well. But these major corporations are benefiting, and people of the world are getting messed over. So, I'm going to pause here. Do people have comments, questions? Yes. Speak really loud so everybody can hear.
When it goes to Congress, is it going to be a simple majority or a 2/3 majority?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's a majority, right? Yeah, simple majority. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's say that Obama has something else in his...
Speak really loud. Here, get this.
Obama has something else in the pipeline that's called TAFTA. That's following after the TPP. And it's worse than, I think, in agriculture, at least than what you described, which is pretty bad. Like Clinton always said with NAFTA, oh, well, we'll handle things like worker safety standards, environmental protection standards, and stuff. We'll add that later. Never got added. Minimum wage standard, stuff like that. But what we're doing is we are subsidizing monocultures, which are ecologically vulnerable, often GMOs, which have not been health tested, that are using massive amounts of pesticides and fertilizers, which are environmentally very destructive. And in order to flood the world market and to put these people out of work, force them off the land, who've been engaging in sustainable, this is unsustainable agriculture, it can't last. They've been engaging in sustainable agriculture, where it goes around, keep on going forever. The manure from the animals plow the fields, it could go on forever, but they push them off the land. We have to go back to that. We have to reverse a lot of what we did. But I thank you very much for your presentation. That was great.
I was wondering, Jerry Brown has got the new minimum raise, minimum wage rise. In January, it's going to be $9, and the next year, $10. Do farm workers come under that, or have they been excluded?
Farm workers are covered by minimum wage laws, the federal minimum wage law. Now, are they covered under, are they covered under state?
Under state, yeah, that's the question, right.
Does anybody here know whether farm workers are going to be covered under this California minimum wage increase?
We don't know.
Yeah, we think they're excluded.
Oh, you think they're excluded? He's going to check on his smartphone. The farm workers nationally are not covered by the standard Fair Labor Standards Act. So therefore, they're not eligible for overtime pay, but they do, under a different law, get covered by the minimum wage. Although if you're on a small farm, I think it's less than 8 people over the course of the year, you are not covered by any minimum wage law. Federally. Yeah.
But here in California means we have a union and they have rights like we all have. Then I would assume that they're under the minimum wage.
What is the question?
Okay, Marty is saying that if workers are in a union, then, I'm going to just add, they're covered by whatever the union contract says.
Right.
So there would be wage protections. Now, despite, the years of struggle of farm workers and the United Farm Workers Union, most farm workers in this state are not covered by a union contract, are not in the union. So, it's a huge struggle that's very, very difficult. And, still today, most farm workers are not in the union.
What do we Google to get all this information? What do we look up? GPP. What?
So your question is, where can people get more information? You can certainly look at the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and I'll just tell you a couple of good organizations to look at this. One would be the Citizens Trade Campaign, which comes out of Public Citizen. You know the group Public Citizen? Ralph Nader's group. The Citizens Trade Campaign. There's also a group called the International, I always get the name wrong, but International Trade and Agricultural Program. I think that's it. IATP.org, I think. There's a lot of people who have written about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. There's a magazine called The American Prospect. We did a special kind of 4-article special section on the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And I believe it was December of 2011.
Yeah. Common Cause.
Okay. Common Cause is another great place. Okay.
The Prospect, the American Prospect did it?
Yeah, American Prospect did a special section devoted to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I think it was December of 2011, but I'm not totally sure about that.
Yeah, it's 2 years ago. 20 years.
I'll just throw out one other, I think, interesting thing.
Been working on since then.
Oh, yeah.
I understand that NAFTA also caused a havoc with the pork industry down in Mexico. Because, they really did cause a lot of small farmers to go under because the pork that was coming in was so much cheaper than what they could produce.
So pork. Now, why would pork from here be so much cheaper? Well, exactly. Because the corn they feed to the hogs is so cheap, right? Falsely cheap. These trade agreements, when they come before Congress and the debates really heat up, what do the people who support the trade agreements say about the critics? Well, they say we're protectionists, right? They try to paint us as if they even acknowledge there's any job concerns, they paint it like, well, we only care about American jobs, and we don't care if Mexicans never get a job, or there's no jobs in the rest of the world. We want to hog all the jobs here. They make it into some kind of we're being selfish, and we're blocking this trade agreement that would benefit all these other countries. Well, these trade agreements are controversial here, And it often comes down to a lot of people not really understanding it, and many people and labor unions and folks like that being opposed and corporate interests in support. And I say with pride, the faith community usually comes down in opposition, which I would say would be on the side of the people, right? The same kind of pattern plays out in other countries. So it's not like in Mexico or in Central America in those days when that treaty was being negotiated, that, you know, people, everybody in Central America supported the Central American Free Trade Agreement. No, there were the same divisions. The corporations liked it, a lot of the hierarchy in the government liked it, but for most people, certainly for the unions, for workers, for the churches, they opposed the Central America Free Trade Agreement. I mentioned NAFTA went into effect in 1994 on January 1st. Now here's a quiz question for all you smart people here. What else began in Mexico on January 1st, 1994 that was a response to NAFTA?
Las Zapatistas.
The Zapatistas.
Okay. Yes. Who wants to tell us what the Zapatistas, what does that mean? What's that about?
All right. Professor?
What's the
Tell you about the Zapatistas. Well, they were fighting for the ideals of Emiliano Zapata. The land belongs to those who work and those who work. And so they were protecting, fighting for the rights and against big corporations.
Yeah.
And for just the survivors.
Yeah. They were also kicked off their farms and were driven into the highlands of the jungles and the aidas of the, you know, the ranches that they had in common. That was all disbanded, so it was a terrible time. And Captain, the Comandante, Marcos, yeah, was famous. I don't know what's happened to him, but it was a good uprising.
Yes, and so there's an example of people engaging in revolt against the Mexican government over NAFTA, anticipating that it would have the impact on agriculture that in fact it had, and wanting to withdraw from the whole system. Actually, they still exist, the Zapatistas. They have what they call autonomous areas that they administer, kind of apart from the national governmental structure. I've got a quote here I'm going to read. This is from an op-ed that appeared in the Asia Times. The Asia Times, Doris may know it. It's based in Hong Kong. This is a Japanese writer who says, and I quote, this sounds like something I would write. Now this is a Japanese woman. She says, the TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, is a Trojan horse branded as a, quote, free trade agreement, but having nothing to do with fair and equitable treatment. In reality, it is precisely a wish list of the 1%, a worldwide corporate power. This is the Asia Times, an article by a Japanese woman. Japan is one of the countries that might be coming into the TPP, right? So when we impose these trade agreements, we're actually aligning ourselves with people in the other countries who are also opposed to these trade agreements, who see that they are bad for workers, no matter if you're a worker here or in the other country. They're bad for the environment, they're bad for cultural integrity and indigenous peoples, but they are good for corporations, and that's how they get passed. Now, yeah, in the back.
Yeah, this is no loss at all, and it looks like most farm workers, including those who work for small farms, are not included under their minimum wage law. Now, if you understand Sacramento, though, the laws are never finalized until the government, they're ready for the governor to sign them. So, you know, they can be adjusted and changed. I work in farmers markets, and I know what that's all about. So they show you one thing, and then it ends up being very different. But we don't think farm workers generally are covered under minimum wage.
Under the California minimum wage, they're covered under the federal.
Well,
They're not covered by the Fair Labor Standards Act, but they are covered by, through another law.
this is state minimum wage.
Okay, state. Yeah, I don't, so he's saying that they're not covered under the California state minimum wage, it seems. Thank you for looking that up. So I'm thinking it's getting late. Do we have any kind of last minute comments?
You could ask her about immigration, about budget or tax structure or anything.
There's one thing you didn't mention, how countries can sue the United States. Like Barbara Boxer had this wonderful porpoise or dolphin-free tuna. And we were sued by Mexico and some other countries that allow the catches to include, and they sued the United States and successfully won. So we have to accept tuna that has dolphin in it.
TBE is another good example.
Yeah.
One of the egregious, I'll just comment on this, and these will be the last thing. One of the egregious problems of these trade agreements, so in addition to writing essentially new laws and new regulations governing commerce, one important part of commerce is what do you do if there's a dispute? If I have a contract with you and I think you're violating the terms of the contract, I would take you to court. I could take you to court, right? So in these trade agreements, which are hundreds of pages long, which for free trade, how many pages do you really need to say there's free trade, right? Hundreds of pages long. They have dispute resolution mechanisms, okay? And here's one of the disputes that you can try to resolve. If I'm a company and I invest in your country, some foreign country, so let's say I'm going to invest in Mexico, part of the protections given to me under the treaty would be if you, Mexico, pass a law, pass a regulation, pass some kind of health protection thing, pass an environmental regulation that takes away my potential profits, I can sue you for the money.
Right, yeah.
And so here's a corporation suing a government. This case would be heard before a tribunal, catch that name, a tribunal of 3 lawyers.
From the country.
It would be held in secret, and once they make their decision, there's no appeals, and that's it. So let me give you one quick example, then we'll end. I know I keep saying this. Yeah. So, this is a real case. Mexico grows sugar, and I think they grow it much here, so we probably should be getting our sugar from them instead of subsidizing American growers, but whatever. But anyway, Mexico had heard all the debate around high fructose corn syrup. And so they changed some of their tariffs and things in terms of bringing high fructose corn syrup into the country, and said we're going to use our own sugar that we grow in Mexico and really cut down our imports of high fructose corn syrup. Well, you can imagine ADM and Cargill and one other company, I can't remember, who make, out of their corn, make a lot of high fructose corn syrup, didn't like this. So they sued Mexico in the International Tribunal, and Mexico lost. It was anti-trade. And Mexico taxpayers ended up paying $169 million to ADM, Cargill, and the third company. So, trade is paramount, right? You cannot, in fact, it's thought that under the TPP, and I wrote it. You probably know, I'm from Washington State, and I was just up there in August. There's a huge fight going on up there over these coal export ports. Have you heard about this? They would bring coal from like Wyoming on huge trains to these ports and then put it on ships to send overseas. Meanwhile, throwing coal dust everywhere, having huge long trains going through all kinds of neighborhoods, and it's a huge problem. People there are really struggling against it. Now, if the TTP were passed, I have read, who knows, you don't really know how these things would be adjudicated in front of one of these tribunals. But if environmentalists and other folks stopped those ports from being built, which is exactly what they're trying to do, it would be seen as a restraint of trade between the U.S. and whatever the country. If the trade was going to be with one of these countries with the TPP, it would be a restraint of trade, and you couldn't stop it. It would be out of your hands. You couldn't even try and stop those coal plants. So these are very serious things for all of us, including the farm workers. Thank you.